The town had a name, but folks just called it Dust Devil. It was the kind of place that chewed up good men and spit out bones. The sun beat down like a hammer on an anvil, and the air was so thick with grit you could taste your own slow death. I'd ridden in for a horse, maybe a bottle of something that could burn the trail out of my throat. I wasn't looking for trouble, but in Dust Devil, trouble had a way of looking for you, and that day trouble was a woman on an auction block. She stood on a splintered platform, a flame in human form. Her skin was the color of rich bronze, gleaming with a fine sheen of sweat under the brutal noon sun. Her hair was a wild mane of midnight black, tangled and free, brushing against a collarbone that seemed too delicate for this harsh world. Her dress was barely there, torn, tattered, a whisper of fabric that clung to her curves, doing little to hide the proud defiance in her posture. A single strap had slipped, revealing the edge of a tattoo on her shoulder. A thunderbird, its black wings curled over her skin like a shadow. My breath caught in my throat. My hand, resting on the butt of my pistol, twitched. I knew that mark. I knew it like I knew the scar above my own eye. The auctioneer, a greasy man with a rat-like face, in a voice that scraped like nails on a coffin, barked out her price. $5. Do I hear 5 for this prime piece of savage beauty? The crowd roared with laughter. It was a cruel, ugly sound. A pack of hyenas closing in. Their eyes weren't just looking. They were devouring her, stripping away what little dignity she had left. Her eyes, dark and molten, scanned the crowd. They weren't pleading. They weren't scared. They were a challenge, a promise of ruin to any man who dared to claim her. Her gaze swept past me, then snapped back. For a split second our eyes locked, and in that moment the whole dusty, miserable world fell away. There was only the heat between us, a current of lightning that jumped the gap and struck me right in the chest. My heart hammered against my ribs. 5 years ago, I was crawling through the desert, dying. My canteen was dust, my tongue was swollen, and the buzzards were circling, just waiting for me to quit twitching. A man found me, an Apache man with a kind face and eyes that held the wisdom of the mountains. He gave me water from his own skin, shared his food, and sat with me through the night, keeping the desert's demons at bay. He asked for nothing in return. He never even told me his name. But as he helped me to my feet the next morning, his shirt shifted, and there on his shoulder was a tattoo, a thunderbird, identical to the one on the woman standing on that block. He had saved my life, a debt I never thought I could repay, until now. The auctioneer cackled. $5, gentlemen, a bargain for a night of untamed pleasure. A drunkard in the front row, smelling of cheap whiskey and desperation, lurched forward. I'll give you 3, and a bottle of rot gut. The crowd howled again. My blood turned to fire. I pushed my way through the jeering mob, my boots heavy in the dust. Every eye turned to me. The laughter died, replaced by a low, curious murmur. I stopped right in front of the platform. I looked up at her, at those unyielding eyes. Then I looked at the auctioneer. My voice came out low and sharp, cutting through the silence like a razor. $500. A collective gasp went through the crowd. The auctioneer's jaw dropped, his beady eyes widening in disbelief. The drunkard who'd offered $3 stumbled back as if I'd hit him. You could have heard a pin drop in that dusty hellhole. The woman on the block, Tala, I would learn her name was Tala, stared at me. The fire in her eyes was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Confusion, shock, maybe even a flicker of something I didn't dare name. Hope. 500? The auctioneer stammered, his greasy smile returning. Sold! To the stranger with more money than sense. A man in the crowd spat on the ground. He's bought himself a curse is what he's done. I ignored him. My eyes were locked on Tala. This wasn't a purchase. This was the payment of a debt. A vow sealed in blood and sand, 5 years ago under a blistering sun. And as I tossed a heavy pouch of gold coins onto the platform, I had a feeling this was only the beginning. Things were about to get a whole lot more complicated. The coins landed with a heavy final thud. The sound echoed in the sudden silence, sealing the deal. sealing her fate, and maybe mine too. The rat-faced auctioneer scurried to untie her, his grimy fingers fumbling with the ropes around her wrists. He gave her a rough shove toward me, a sneer twisting his lips. "She's all yours, friend. Try not to get yourself scalped." Tala stumbled, her bare feet kicking up dust. I reached out and steadied her, my hand closing around her arm. A jolt shot through me. Her skin was hot, alive. It felt like grabbing a lightning rod in a thunderstorm. Her breath hitched, her chest rising and falling rapidly under the torn fabric of her dress. For a half second, she leaned into my touch, her body trembling. Her eyes, those dark, stormy pools, searched mine. She was looking for an answer, for a reason. I didn't have one to give her. Not yet. The crowd began to close in, their whispers turning into angry mutters. They didn't like outsiders. They didn't like people upsetting the natural order of their miserable town. And buying an Apache woman for $500 was definitely upsetting the order. "Let's go," I said, my voice low. I guided her down from the platform, keeping my body between her and the mob. Their glares felt like physical blows. We moved fast, slipping into the maze of back alleys that stank of stale beer and regret. Her steps were quick and sure, her head held high. She wasn't a victim being led to safety. She was a queen escaping a rabble. At the livery stable, I untied my horse, Grit. He was a sturdy bay, dependable and quiet, everything a man could want in a partner. Tala stood by the doorway, rubbing the raw, red marks on her wrists. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy with unspoken questions. "What's your name?" I finally asked, keeping my voice soft. She looked at me, her gaze guarded, assessing. She was deciding if I was a threat, if I was just another man who wanted to own her. After a long moment, she spoke. Her voice was husky, cracked from thirst, but steady. "Tala." "I'm Jack," I said. A flicker of recognition crossed her face, or maybe I just imagined it. I offered her my hand to help her onto the horse. She hesitated, then her fingers grazed mine. It was a deliberate touch, warm and electric, sending that same jolt straight to my core. I pulled my hand back like I'd been burned. She swung up behind me with a fluid grace that was breathtaking. Her body pressed against my back. Not close, but just enough for me to feel her warmth. Her hands rested lightly at my waist. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to focus. We rode out of Dust Devil without looking back. The town and its ugly whispers faded into a haze of heat and dust behind us. The open desert stretched out before us, vast and unforgiving. As we rode, Tala's grip on my waist tightened almost imperceptibly. Her breath was warm against the back of my neck. I fought every instinct that screamed at me to turn around, to look into her eyes, to figure out the mystery that was burning a hole in my back. But I didn't. I just kept riding, because I had a strange feeling that if I looked back now, I'd be lost for good. The sun bled out across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and fiery orange. We made camp in the shelter of a dry creek bed, the silence of the desert a welcome relief after the noise of the town. I built a small fire. The flames danced, casting flickering shadows across Tala's face. She sat across from me, her knees drawn up to her chest, the torn dress revealing the graceful curve of her shoulder and the Thunderbird tattoo that had started this whole mess. She was the first to speak. "My father," she said, her voice a low murmur. "He spoke of a man he saved in the desert, a man near death. He said the man had eyes the color of a stormy sky." She looked right at me. I just nodded. The memory was still vivid. Her father's kindness had been a drop of water in the hell of that desert. He gave me water when I was half dead, never asked for my name, never asked for a thing. A softness crept into her eyes, the firelight making them glisten. She leaned forward, just a fraction, the movement so subtle I might have missed it if my every nerve wasn't screamingly aware of her. "He was a good man," she whispered. I passed her a tin cup of water. Our hands brushed. This time her fingers lingered, a brief, warm pressure against mine. The air between us crackled, charged with a tension that had nothing to do with the dangers we'd left behind. My pulse hammered in my ears. Her gaze held mine, a silent dare. Then she pulled back. The softness in her eyes vanished, replaced by a hard, cold fury. The moment was broken. "He's dead now," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "They killed him." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The heat in my blood turned to ice. "Who?" "Outlaws," she said, and now her voice was a blade. "They burned our village. They took my sisters." Her knuckles were white where she gripped the tin cup. I could see the pain behind her anger, the raw grief that fueled her fire. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. This was vengeance. "Where are they?" I asked. "Devil's Cut," she said without hesitation. "A canyon west of here. It's their stronghold. That's where they take what they steal. Horses, supplies, women." The plan was already forming in my mind, simple and brutal. "We ride at dawn." She looked at me, a faint ghost of a smile touching her lips. It wasn't a real smile, not yet, but it was enough to make my chest ache. "You're not afraid," she stated. It wasn't a question. I managed a smirk. "Not yet." I lay back on my bedroll, my rifle close at hand. The stars overhead were sharp and cold, a million miles away. Tala settled on the other side of the dying fire, a silhouette of vengeance against the flames. I had ridden into Dust Devil to pay a debt to a dead man, but listening to the quiet, ragged rhythm of Tala's breathing in the darkness, I knew this was her fight now, her pain, and I'd be damned if I was going to let her face it alone. But as I stared up at that cold, uncaring sky, a single nagging thought took root in my mind. The auctioneer. The $5 opening bid. It was an insult designed to humiliate her. But what if it was something else? What if it wasn't just an insult? What if it was a message, a signal meant for someone in the crowd, someone who was expecting her? The thought sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the desert night. Dawn broke raw and angry, spilling red light across the desert floor. We broke camp in silence, the air sharp and cold. Tala moved with a quiet, lethal grace, her jaw set. The feather woven into her dark hair trembled in the wind. She was a weapon, honed by grief and fury. I swung into the saddle, and she climbed up behind me. Her hands found my waist, her warmth a stark contrast to the morning chill. It was a distraction I couldn't afford, but one I couldn't escape. Grit's hooves pounded a steady rhythm against the hard-packed earth as we rode west. The desert stretched out, a merciless landscape of rock and thorn. Tala guided me. She didn't need a map. The land spoke to her in a language I couldn't understand. "There," she'd murmur, her breath warm against my ear, pointing to a set of hoof prints so faint I would have ridden right over them. 10 horses, 2 shod, 8 are not. Apache horses. A little while later, she pointed again. A snapped branch, too high for a coyote. A rider passed this way no more than a day ago. Her knowledge was humbling. Beside her, I was just a clumsy outsider, blind to the secrets the desert held. By midday, the signs became clearer. We found the deep ruts of a heavy wagon, fresh, too fresh. Tala slid off Grit before he'd even stopped moving. She knelt, her fingers tracing the grooves in the earth. Her hair fell forward, a dark curtain hiding her face. She looked up at me, her eyes burning with an intensity that stole my breath. "They're careless," she said, her voice a low growl. "They think no one would be foolish enough to follow." "Or," I said, the thought from last night resurfacing, cold and sharp, "they want to be followed." Her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "The auction," I said, thinking out loud. $5. It was too low, even for a town like that. It felt staged, like a performance. She rose to her feet, standing so close I could feel the heat radiating from her. "They knew someone would buy me? Or they knew I would," I finished. A sudden, chilling realization washed over me. The Thunderbird tattoo. It wasn't just a tribal marking. It was a signpost, a beacon. Her father hadn't just saved a random drifter. He had saved me. And maybe he'd told someone. Maybe the story of the man with stormy eyes he'd saved from death had become a tale told around their campfires. A tale the outlaws might have heard. "They know who you are," Tala whispered, her eyes wide with the same terrible understanding. "They didn't just let me escape. They used me as bait." The desert suddenly felt a lot smaller. We weren't the hunters anymore. We were the hunted. and we were walking right into their trap. The trap was sprung sooner than we expected. We were riding through a narrow pass with high rock walls on either side, a perfect place for an ambush. My hand was already on my pistol, my senses screaming. Suddenly, Tala's hand clamped down on my arm. "Stop!" I pulled Grit to a halt. The silence was absolute. Too absolute. Not even the buzz of an insect. "What is it?" I whispered. She didn't answer. She was looking up, at the top of the canyon wall to our right. I followed her gaze. Nothing. Just rock and shadow. "I see nothing," I said. "That's the problem," she breathed. "There should be a lizard on that flat rock. There always is. He suns himself there every day." A lizard? My life might depend on a lizard. Then I saw it, a faint glint of light from the top of the ridge, the sun catching polished metal, a rifle barrel. I reacted without thinking. I kicked my heels into Grit's sides and threw myself sideways, pulling Tala with me. We tumbled from the saddle, hitting the hard ground just as a rifle shot cracked the silence. A bullet slammed into the spot where my head had been a second before, kicking up a spray of rock chips. Grit screamed and bolted, galloping down the pass in a blind panic. Another shot rang out, then another. Bullets whined off the rocks around us, pinning us down. We were trapped, on foot, with at least one rifleman above us. "How many?" I yelled over the gunfire. Tala was already moving, crawling like a snake toward a cluster of boulders. "Just one, I think. But he's not alone. This is a scouting party." We scrambled behind the rocks, the air filled with the sharp crack of the rifle and the angry buzz of lead. "They're trying to flush us out," I said, peering around the edge of our cover. "Drive us down the pass, toward the rest of them." Tala pulled the long, wicked-looking knife from her belt. Her face was a mask of cold fury. "Then we don't go down the pass." She looked up the steep, almost sheer cliff face above us. It was a treacherous climb, full of loose rock and sharp edges. A fall would mean certain death. "You're crazy," I said. She gave me that ghost of a smile again. "You haven't seen crazy yet." The rifleman above us was getting impatient. His shots were getting closer, chipping away at our cover. We couldn't stay here. "We go on 3, she said, her eyes locked on the cliff face. "Stay in my shadow." I didn't have a better plan. "1, I said, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. "2, she whispered, her body coiled like a spring. A bullet screamed past my ear, so close I felt its heat. "3!" We broke cover. We didn't run down the pass. We ran straight at the cliff face. The rifleman, surprised by our move, fumbled his next shot. The bullet went wide, ricocheting harmlessly off the canyon wall. That was all the time we needed. Tala hit the rock wall and started to climb. She moved with a speed and agility that defied belief, finding handholds and footholds where I saw only smooth, unforgiving stone. She was a part of this land, a creature of the rocks and the sky. I followed, my clumsy boots scraping for purchase, my lungs burning. The climb was brutal. Every muscle screamed in protest. Loose gravel rained down from above as the rifleman fired again, the shots getting wilder as he realized his mistake. He was trying to kill us, but he'd only forced us to higher ground, to his ground. After an eternity of straining muscles and ragged breaths, I hauled myself over the ledge at the top. I lay there gasping for air, my chest heaving. Tala was already on her feet. She stood silhouetted against the setting sun, her knife in her hand, her hair whipping in the wind. The rifleman was 20 yards away, his back to us. He was frantically trying to reload, cursing his luck, still focused on the spot where we'd started our climb. He never knew we were there. Tala moved like a ghost, a silent shadow flowing over the rock. I didn't see the strike. It was too fast. One moment he was standing, the next he was on the ground, a dark stain spreading across the front of his shirt. She wiped her blade on his pants and turned to me. Her eyes held no triumph, no satisfaction, only a cold, grim resolve. "That's 1, she said. My horse was gone. We had no water, no supplies, and we both knew the rifleman's friends wouldn't be far behind. The sun was setting, and the desert was about to show its teeth. The desert at night is a different beast. The heat of the day bleeds away, replaced by a deep, biting cold. The shadows twist and writhe, and every gust of wind sounds like a whispered threat. We walked for hours, guided by the cold light of the stars. Tala moved with a tireless, steady pace, her senses on high alert. I followed, my own exhaustion a dull ache in my bones. The adrenaline from the fight had worn off, leaving me feeling empty and exposed. "We need to find water," I said, my voice hoarse. Tala nodded, not breaking her stride. "There is a spring, 2 hours north of here, if the outlaws haven't found it." It was a big if. An outlaw gang like this, they'd know all the good water sources. It was the lifeblood of the desert. As we walked, Tala began to talk. Not about her father, or her sisters, or the vengeance she sought. She talked about the man she had just killed. "His name was Chaitin," she said, her voice a low monotone. "He was of the Jicarilla people. He traded with my tribe sometimes. He was always trying to cheat us." "How do you know it was him?" I asked. "I smelled the cheap tobacco he smoked," she said simply. "And I saw the beaded armband he wore. His wife made it for him." The casual way she said it sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't some faceless enemy to her. She knew them. "The leader," I said. "You said you know his face. Is he Apache?" She was silent for a long time. The only sound was the crunch of our boots on the gravel. "His name is Silas," she finally said, her voice tight with a hatred so profound it felt like a physical thing. "He was once one of us, my father's protege. He was strong, a great warrior, but his heart was filled with shadows. He wanted power, not peace. He questioned the old ways." "What happened?" "My father, the chief, exiled him for trying to turn our warriors against a neighboring tribe, to steal their land and horses. It is not our way. We trade, we live in balance. Silas saw this as weakness." Now it all made sense. This wasn't just about greed. This was personal, a bitter, festering vendetta. Silas wasn't just raiding a village. He was destroying the legacy of the man who had cast him out. "He came back with an army of broken men," Tala continued, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Outcasts, deserters, white men with dead eyes. He promised them wealth. He burned our homes. He killed my father in front of me." She stopped walking and turned to face me. The starlight was faint, but I could see the tears glistening on her cheeks. They were the first I'd seen. "He did not just kill him," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He mocked him. He cut the thunderbird from his skin while he was still breathing." I had no words. There was nothing I could say to that kind of pain. All I could do was stand there, a witness to her grief. Suddenly she reached out and her hand gripped my forearm. Her touch was desperate, her fingers digging into my muscle. "When you bought me, Jack," she said, her voice raw, "at the auction, the auctioneer, he had a scar, a crescent moon just behind his left ear." My blood ran cold. "So? Silas has the same scar," she whispered. "They are brothers." The trap wasn't just the ambush in the pass. The trap had been the entire town of Dust Devil. The auction, the rat-faced auctioneer, the $5 bid. It was all a carefully orchestrated play. They weren't just using Tala as bait for me. They were using both of us as pawns in Silas's sick, twisted game of revenge. And we had walked right into the middle of the board. We reached the spring just before dawn. It was a small oasis, a patch of impossible green huddled around a trickle of water seeping from the rocks. It was hidden, secluded, and it was empty. For now. We drank our fill, the cool water a blessing on our parched throats. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, I saw the tracks. Hoof prints, at least a dozen horses, and the deep tracks of the wagon. They had been here, less than a day ago. They were heading west, straight for Devil's Cut. Tala knelt, examining the ground. "They're not moving fast," she said. "The wagon is slowing them down." "The wagon holds your sisters," I stated. She nodded, her jaw tight. We had a choice to make. We could follow them on foot without supplies and walk right into their stronghold. It was suicide. Or we could turn back, try to find grit, and come up with a better plan. But that would mean leaving her sisters in Silas's hands for longer. An impossible choice. "We follow," Tala said, leaving no room for argument. "We stay in the rocks. Keep to the high ground. They will not be expecting us on foot." It was reckless. It was foolish. It was our only option. We spent the day shadowing them, a pair of ghosts haunting their trail. We were far enough away that they couldn't see us, but close enough that we could see the dust cloud kicked up by their party. The sun was a relentless enemy, beating down on us, trying to bake the life out of us. By late afternoon, we crested a high ridge and looked down. And there it was, Devil's Cut. It was a jagged scar gouged into the earth, a deep canyon with sheer, blood-red walls. Smoke curled up from its depths, a thin gray plume against the blue sky. I could hear the faint sounds of coarse laughter and shouted commands drifting up on the wind. It was a fortress, a natural stronghold. Attacking it would be madness. Tala's fingers dug into my arm, her nails sharp against my skin. "My sisters," she whispered, her voice raw with anguish. "Nika and Sana." I could see them now, tied to a wagon wheel near a large campfire, two smaller, more fragile versions of Tala. Their faces were pale with fear, but their heads were held high. That same unbreakable pride burned in them. A man emerged from the shadows of a rock overhang. He was tall and lean, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and then smashed with a hammer. A nasty crescent-shaped scar was carved into the skin behind his left ear. Silas. He walked over to the sisters and grabbed the chin of the younger one, forcing her to look at him. He said something, and a cruel, twisted grin spread across his face. Tala let out a small choke sound. Her whole body went rigid. Her hand flew to the knife at her belt. I grabbed her wrist, my fingers wrapping around hers. Her pulse was a wild, frantic bird beating against my skin. "Not yet," I whispered, my voice a low growl. We wait. We wait for the dark." She looked at me, her eyes burning with a desperate, helpless rage. For a moment I thought she was going to fight me, to throw herself down into that canyon in a suicidal charge. But then she nodded, a single sharp jerk of her head. We settled in behind a cluster of boulders, the hard rock digging into our backs. All we could do was watch and wait as the sun dipped below the horizon and the long, cold shadows of night began to fall. Every laugh from that camp felt like a razor blade against my skin. The waiting was a special kind of hell, but as darkness finally swallowed the canyon, a new terrible thought occurred to me. Silas had gone to so much trouble to lure us here. The auction, the ambush. It was an elaborate game. But why? If he just wanted me dead, he could have had his brother's men in town do it. If he just wanted Tala back, he could have sent riders after us. No, he wanted us here, in his fortress. This wasn't just about revenge against a dead man. He wanted something from Tala, something she had, something he was willing to burn the world down to get. And he was using her sisters as the key to unlock it. The night deepened, black and moonless. The outlaws in the canyon drank themselves into a stupor, their boisterous laughter slowly fading into drunken snores. One by one they stumbled to their bedrolls, until only two men were left awake. A single sentry, pacing lazily at the narrow entrance to the camp. And Silas. He sat by the fire sharpening a long curved knife, his eyes fixed on Nika and Sana. He was a predator, savoring the fear of his prey. He was in no hurry. The time had come. "I'll take the sentry," I whispered, my mouth close to Tala's ear. "You get your sisters. We meet back at the goat trail on the far side." She shook her head. Her eyes, gleaming in the faint starlight, were like chips of obsidian. "The sentry is mine." There was no arguing with the look on her face. It was a look that said this was her fight, her right. "All right," I conceded. "I'll create a diversion. When you hear it, move." I crept away, circling around the edge of the canyon. I found what I was looking for, a pile of loose rocks and scree perched precariously on the cliff edge, directly above the camp's horse line. I waited. I watched Tala move down the narrow, winding goat trail that led into the canyon. She was a shadow among shadows, completely invisible to the drunk, sleepy sentry. The man leaned against a rock, his rifle held loosely in his hands. He yawned, his head drooping. Tala flowed out of the darkness behind him. There was no sound, no struggle, just a flash of movement, a swift, brutal ballet of death. She eased his body to the ground, taking his rifle before melting back into the shadows near the wagons. My heart was in my throat. God help me. She was magnificent. I took a deep breath. It was my turn. I shoved my shoulder into the largest boulder at the base of the rock pile. It teetered for a moment, then gave way. The rest of the rocks followed, creating a thunderous rock slide that crashed down into the far end of the camp. Horses screamed in terror. Men shouted in confusion, stumbling out of their blankets, grabbing for their guns. It was the perfect diversion. In the chaos, I saw Tala dart to the wagon wheel. Her knife flashed, cutting the ropes that bound her sisters. She pulled them to their feet, whispering urgent instructions. We were so close to getting away clean. But our luck had run out. As Tala and her sisters slipped away from the wagons, a bottle knocked over by a stumbling outlaw rolled across the stone ground. Clink, clink, clink. It was a small sound, but in a moment of sudden silence, it was as loud as a gunshot. Silas, who had been distracted by the rock slide, whipped his head around. His eyes, accustomed to the dark, found them instantly. A terrible, triumphant roar ripped from his throat. There! A pistol shot cracked the night, then another. Bullets sparked off the rocks near the sisters' feet. The diversion was over. The fight had begun. I scrambled down the trail, firing my own pistol into the camp, trying to draw their attention. I dropped one man, then another, but there were too many of them. They were waking up, shaking off their drunken haze, their killer instincts taking over. Tala shoved her sisters toward the goat trail. "Run!" she screamed. But Nika, the older sister, stumbled and fell, her ankle twisting with a sickening crack. She cried out in pain. Tala didn't hesitate. She turned back for her sister, even as Silas and 3 of his men charged toward them, their guns blazing. Sana, the youngest, stood frozen in terror between her fallen sister and the safety of the trail. They were trapped. I was too far away to help. I fired again, but it was useless. They were closing in. Silas was grinning, a monster savoring his victory. But he had underestimated them. He had forgotten what blood ran in their veins. Tala let out a warrior's cry, a sound of pure, primal rage that echoed off the canyon walls. She didn't run. She didn't cower. She charged. She launched herself at the oncoming men, the sentry's rifle in one hand, her knife in the other. She fired the rifle from her hip, the blast deafening in the enclosed space. One of the outlaws clutched his chest and fell. She dropped the empty rifle and met the next man with her blade, a whirlwind of deadly motion. It was the bravest, most foolish thing I had ever seen. It bought Sana the second she needed. The young girl unfroze, scrambling to her injured sister, trying to pull her to her feet. But it wouldn't be enough. Silas was almost on top of Tala, his own long knife gleaming in the firelight, his face a mask of victory. Tala was good, but she was 1 against 2, and Silas was a demon. I was still too far. I wouldn't make it. And that's when it happened. Something I never would have predicted. Nika, the injured sister, propped herself up on one elbow. Her face was pale with pain, but her eyes were blazing with the same fire as Tala's. She reached into the bodice of her dress and pulled out a small, crudely made pistol. A Derringer. Where in God's name did she get that? She aimed it at Silas, her hand trembling, and pulled the trigger. The shot was small, a pop compared to the roar of the other guns. But it was true. Silas screamed, not in pain, but in sheer, frustrated rage. The bullet had torn through the fleshy part of his shoulder. It wasn't a fatal wound, but it was enough. He stumbled back, his charge broken. That was the opening we needed. I reached them, grabbing Sana and helping her lift Nika. Tala finished the last outlaw with a brutal efficiency that turned my stomach even as I admired it. We scrambled up the goat trail, a hail of bullets chasing us. Silas was on his feet again, roaring at his men, his voice filled with a furious promise of the hell that awaited us. We reached the top of the canyon, gasping for breath, our lungs on fire. We had no horse, no water. Nika was badly injured. We had escaped the canyon, but we were 1,000 miles from safe. We were fugitives in a land that wanted us dead. We ran, stumbling through the darkness, putting as much distance as we could between ourselves and the enraged hornet's nest we'd stirred up. I half-carried, half-dragged Nika, whose ankle was swelling to the size of a melon. Every step was agony for her, but she didn't make a sound. her teeth gritted in a mask of pain. Tala and Sana flanked us, their eyes constantly scanning the darkness, their ears straining for the sound of pursuit. The adrenaline wore off, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion and a gnawing dread. "They'll come for us," Sana whispered, her voice trembling. She was just a girl, and the terror of the past few days was catching up to her. "Let them come," Tala growled, her voice low and dangerous. We found a shallow cave, barely an overhang in a rock face, to hide in as the sun began to rise. It wasn't much, but it was cover. I tore a strip of cloth from my shirt and used it to bind Nika's ankle, making a crude splint from a couple of dry branches. She winced but thanked me with her eyes. "The gun," I said, looking at her. "Where did you get it?" Nika glanced at Tala before answering. "One of the guards, in the camp. He got careless. I took it from him when he wasn't looking." I looked at Tala. There was a secret here, a story I wasn't getting, but now wasn't the time to push. We huddled together in the cave trying to rest. But sleep wouldn't come. Every sound was the hoofbeat of an outlaw's horse. Every shadow was Silas coming to claim his prize. As the day wore on, the heat became unbearable. Our thirst was a physical pain, a fire in our throats. Nika was growing weaker, her face pale and clammy. "We can't stay here," I said. "We need water, and Nika needs help." Tala nodded. "There is a place, an old mission, abandoned. The monks who built it knew of a hidden well. It never runs dry. It's a day's walk from here." "They'll be tracking us," I warned. "They'll find our trail." "They will be tracking 3 people," Tala said, a strange light in her eyes. 2 women helping an injured one." I didn't understand. "There are 3 of you." "No," she said, looking from Nika to Sana. "Sana will go with you, to the mission. Nika is too weak to make the journey, even with help. She would slow you down too much." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "What will you and Nika do?" "We will stay here," Nika said, her voice surprisingly strong. "And I will leave a new trail, a false one for Silas to follow." My blood ran cold. "You're going to be bait? You can't even walk." Tala pulled her knife. "I will make her a travois, a drag sled. I will pull her. The tracks will be deep and clear, easy to follow. It will lead them away from you and Sana." "It's suicide," I hissed. "They'll catch you within hours." "No," Tala said, her eyes locking with mine. "They will not catch us. Because Silas is not just hunting me. He is hunting for something he thinks I have." She reached up and touched the feather in her hair. It looked like a simple hawk feather, but now I saw the intricate carvings on its quill. "My father was the keeper of our history," she said quietly. "Not just our stories, but our maps. Maps to sacred places, places of power. When he knew Silas was coming, he gave me this. The map is carved on the quill. Silas knows it exists. He wants it. He believes it leads to a lost silver mine." "Does it?" I asked. A faint, bitter smile touched her lips. "No, it leads to a burial ground, our most sacred place. Silas would defile it. He thinks he will find riches. He will only find the bones of my ancestors." It all clicked into place. The chase, the elaborate trap. Silas didn't just want revenge. He wanted wealth. He wanted to desecrate everything Tala's father had held sacred. "He will follow the trail of the travois," Tala continued, her voice gaining strength. "He will think I am desperate, dragging my injured sister, clinging to his prize. He will get greedy. He will get careless. And I will lead him into the heart of the serpent's tooth, a maze of canyons from which no one has ever returned." It was a brilliant plan, a desperate plan, a plan that would likely get her killed. "I'm not leaving you," I said, my voice rough. "You must," she insisted. She grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Sana must be protected. You gave your word to my father's memory. This is how you honor it. Get her to safety. Please, Jack." I looked at Sana's terrified face. I looked at Nika's pained but resolute expression, and I looked into Tala's eyes, and I saw the fire of 1,000 warrior ancestors burning there. I was trapped. She had given me no choice. "All right," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "I will take Sana to the mission." I turned to the young girl. We leave in 1 hour. As I helped Sana prepare, a horrifying thought wormed its way into my brain. Tala's plan was good, but it relied on one thing. It relied on Silas believing that the injured woman she was dragging was Nika. What if he knew it wasn't? What if Nika's accidental fall in the canyon wasn't an accident at all? What if her conveniently procured derringer wasn't just a lucky find? What if the quiet, injured sister was the most dangerous one of them all? The thought was monstrous. But in this land of dust and death, monstrous things had a way of being true. Leaving Tala felt like tearing out a part of myself. I watched her rig the travois, her movements efficient and sure. She and Nika shared a look, a silent communication that spoke of a lifetime of sisterhood and a bond forged in fire. There was no fear in their eyes, only purpose. I turned to Sana. Stay close. Don't make a sound. She nodded, her eyes wide and haunted. She was just a kid, caught in a nightmare. We moved north, keeping to the rockiest ground we could find to hide our tracks. Every step I took away from Tala felt wrong. My instincts were screaming at me to turn back. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see Silas and his men cresting the ridge behind us. The sun was a merciless tyrant. The heat was dizzying. Our water was long gone, and the abandoned mission felt like a phantom, a mirage that kept receding with every step we took. Sana stumbled, her breath coming in ragged gasps. I caught her, pulling her into the thin strip of shade offered by a towering rock formation. We have to rest, I said. She sank to the ground, her head in her hands. They're going to die, she whispered. Tala and Nika. He's going to kill them. Your sisters are strong, I said, the words feeling hollow even to me. Tala has a plan. Silas always has a better plan, she sobbed. He's not a man. He's a demon. He sees everything. Her words sent a chill through me, despite the heat. What do you mean he sees everything? She looked up, her face streaked with dirt and tears. In the camp. He knew things. He knew Nika was the best healer. He knew I was afraid of snakes. He knew. He knew Tala's secret name, the one only our family knows. My blood turned to ice. How could he know those things? Unless someone had told him. My mind reeled back to the canyon. Nika's fall, the derringer, her story about the careless guard. It was too convenient, too perfect. The nagging doubt I'd had in the cave grew into a monstrous certainty. Sana, I said, my voice low and urgent, listen to me very carefully. When Nika was taken, was she with you? Sana shook her head. No, I was captured at the river. Nika was in the village. They brought her to the wagon later. She didn't fight like Tala would have. She was quiet. She said it was better to be smart than to be brave. Smart. The final piece of the puzzle slammed into place, and the picture it made was hideous. Tala wasn't leading Silas into a trap. Nika was leading Tala into a trap. She hadn't been captured. She had gone with them willingly. Her injury was a lie. The derringer wasn't for Silas. It was to make her story believable. She was the traitor. She had sold out her own family, her own father, for what? Power? Survival? A place at Silas's side? The false trail wasn't meant to lead Silas away from us. It was meant to separate me and Sana from Tala, to isolate her. Once we were gone, Nika would lead Silas right to her. And I had let it happen. I had walked away and left Tala alone with the snake. A wave of pure, cold fury washed over me, clearing my head. We're going back, I said, my voice a deadly calm. Sana looked at me, confused. But the mission, the water. There's no time, I said, pulling her to her feet. Your sister's in more danger than you can possibly imagine. We turned and began to retrace our steps, moving as fast as we could. The mission, safety, water, none of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was getting back to Tala before the trap was sprung. But as we scrambled over a ridge, I saw it. In the valley below, the tracks of the travois, clear and deep in the sand, and alongside them the tracks of a dozen horses. They had already found her. I was too late. Panic and rage fought for control inside me. I had to think. Charging in would be suicide. Silas had all the advantages. "We can't go down there," I told Sana, pulling her back behind the ridge. "We need a better position." I scanned the landscape. The trail Tala was following led directly towards a narrow box canyon, the Serpent's Tooth. It was her intended trap for Silas, but now it was about to become her tomb. There was only one other way into that canyon system, a high, treacherous trail used by mountain goats, one that led to a series of ledges overlooking the canyon floor. It was a long shot. It was dangerous. It was our only hope. "This way," I said, grabbing Sana's hand. "And be quiet." The climb was hell. The rock was loose, the handholds were tiny, and a single misstep would send us plummeting to our deaths. Sana was terrified, but she was her father's daughter. She bit back her fear and followed me without complaint. After what felt like an eternity, we reached the ledge. We were high above the canyon floor, hidden in the shadows, and we were just in time to watch the final act of the tragedy unfold. Down below, Tala stood in the center of a small clearing, surrounded. Silas and his men had their guns trained on her. The travois lay on the ground, empty, and standing beside Silas, looking perfectly healthy, with a cruel, triumphant smile on her face, was Nika. Tala's face was a mask of stone. She showed no surprise, no shock. She must have figured it out. She just stared at her sister, her eyes filled with a sorrow so deep it was painful to watch. "Hello, sister," Nika said, her voice dripping with venom. "Did you really think you could outsmart me?" "Why, Nika?" Tala's voice was a broken whisper. "Why? Why?" Nika laughed, a shrill, ugly sound. "Because I was tired of living in your shadow. You were father's favorite, the great warrior, the next chief. And what was I? The quiet healer, the smart one. He never saw my strength." "So you sided with the man who murdered him?" Tala choked out. "Silas understands ambition," Nika spat. "He sees my value. When he finds the lost silver mine, we will rule this entire territory together." Silas stepped forward, his scarred face twisted in a grin. "Enough family reunion. The map, Tala. Give it to me, or I will let your sister show you just how good a healer she can be at causing pain." Tala didn't move. She just stood there, a solitary, defiant figure against a backdrop of betrayal. I raised my pistol, trying to get a clear shot at Silas. But they were too close together. Nika was standing right beside him. If I missed, I could hit her. Wait, if I missed, I could hit Nika, the traitor, the snake who had sent her own sister to her death. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. What was one more body in this god-forsaken canyon? But before I could pull the trigger, Tala moved. She wasn't reaching for a weapon. She reached up and slowly, deliberately, pulled the feather from her hair. She held it out to Silas. "You want the map?" she said, her voice clear and strong, echoing in the canyon. "Here it is." She wasn't surrendering. This was something else. This was a warrior's last stand. I didn't know what her plan was, but I knew I had to do something. Now. And then I saw it, just above the clearing where they stood. A huge, precariously balanced rock formation, weathered by centuries of wind and rain. It looked like a giant coiled serpent, ready to strike. The Serpent's Tooth. An idea, insane and desperate, exploded in my mind. I turned to Sana. "Give me your shawl." She looked at me, confused, but untied the thin, brightly colored cloth from her waist and handed it to me. I pulled a small tin of oil from my pouch, used for cleaning my gun. I soaked the shawl in the oil. I had one match left. Just one. "When I tell you," I whispered to Sana, "scream as loud as you can. Scream for Tala." I held my pistol in my right hand. In my left, I held the oil-soaked shawl and the single precious match. I took a deep breath. Down below, Silas snatched the feather from Tala's hand. He held it up, his eyes gleaming with greed as he examined the tiny markings on the quill. Nika cackled with glee beside him. They had won. They were distracted. "Now, Sana!" I yelled. Sana let out a piercing shriek. "Tala! Up here!" Every head in the canyon snapped up. They saw us. Two figures on the high ledge. For a split second, they were confused, startled. It was all the time I needed. I struck the match. It flared to life. I touched it to the oil-soaked shawl. It erupted in a ball of flame. At the same instant, I fired my pistol. Not at Silas, not at Nika. I fired at the base of the serpent's tooth. My bullet struck the rock, a tiny spark in the grand scheme of things. But it was enough. A deep, groaning sound filled the canyon as the ancient rock formation began to shift. With my other hand, I threw the flaming shawl. It sailed through the air, a comet of fire, and landed in a patch of dry brush right at the narrow entrance of the box canyon. The brush ignited instantly, a wall of flame sealing the only way out. Down below, chaos erupted. The outlaws screamed, trapped between the fire and the impending rockslide. Silas and Nika stood frozen for a half second, their faces masks of disbelief. Tala reacted instantly. She dove, tackling Nika to the ground, pulling her sister under a rock overhang just as the world came crashing down. The serpent's tooth fell. Tons of rock and dust cascaded into the canyon, a thunderous avalanche of death. It buried everything: the outlaws, their horses, Silas's greed, and Nika's betrayal. The ground shook, and then silence. A thick cloud of dust filled the canyon, so dense I couldn't see a thing. "Tala!" Sana screamed, her voice filled with terror. "Tala!" There was no answer. The dust was a choking, blinding fog. Sana and I scrambled down the goat trail, our hearts pounding with a terrible dread. Had she made it? Had the overhang protected her? We reached the canyon floor. It was a scene of utter devastation. A mountain of fresh rock and rubble covered the clearing. The fire at the entrance still raged, blocking any escape. "Tala!" I yelled, my voice raw. Silence. Sana began to sob, a desperate, hopeless sound. We started to dig through the smaller rocks at the edge of the slide, our hands raw and bleeding. It was useless. The main pile was enormous, impassable. And then I heard it, a faint cough. It came from near the canyon wall, from under the overhang. "Tala!" We scrambled over the rocks and found her. She was alive, pinned under a heavy timber from one of the outlaws' wagons, but alive. Her leg was trapped, clearly broken, but she was conscious. And lying beside her, unmoving, was Nika. A large, jagged rock had struck her in the head. Her eyes were open, staring sightlessly at the dusty sky. Tala looked at her sister's body, and for the first time since I'd met her, her mask of strength crumbled completely. A deep, soul-wrenching sob escaped her lips. She had tried to save the sister who had betrayed her, and she had failed. It took both me and Sana to move the timber and free her. We helped her to her feet, her arm draped over my shoulder, her face a mess of dirt, sweat, and tears. "It's over," I said softly. She shook her head, looking at the mountain of rock that was Silas's tomb. "No, it's not." "What do you mean?" I asked. "They're gone, all of them." "Not all of them," she whispered, her eyes filled with a new kind of fear. "You don't understand, Jack. Silas was greedy. He was cruel. But he wasn't smart enough to plan all of this. The auction, the fake escape, knowing my secret name." My blood ran cold. "He had a partner. More than a partner," Tala said, her voice trembling. "He had a master, someone who pulled the strings, someone who knew everything about my family, someone back in our village." The fire at the canyon entrance began to die down, the smoke thinning, and through the haze I saw them. Riders, at least 20 of them. They sat on their horses at the mouth of the canyon, watching us. They weren't outlaws. They were Apache warriors. And at their head sat a man with a face like a hawk, his hair gray with age, his expression grim and unreadable. He wore the feathered headdress of a chief. An elder stepped forward from the group. I recognized him. I'd seen him in the village, a respected council member. He looked at the devastation, at Nika's body, at Tala's broken leg. Then he looked at me, and he smiled, a cold, thin, terrible smile. "Thank you, Jack," the elder said, his voice smooth as silk. "You have delivered the map and disposed of our inconvenient business partners." He gestured to the feather, which lay in the dust near Silas's hand. One of the warriors dismounted and picked it up. It was him. He was the mastermind. the man who had betrayed Tala's father. He had used Silas to get the map and to eliminate the chief's daughters, clearing the way for him to seize power. He had used Nika's ambition, Silas's greed, and my debt of honor as his weapons. We were all just pieces in his game. You, Tala breathed, her voice filled with venom. It was you all along. Your father was a fool, the elder sneered. He clung to the old ways, to peace and tradition. This land requires strength. It requires silver to buy guns to fight the white man. Your father hid that strength from us. I am simply taking what is ours. He looked at Sana, who shrank back behind me. 2 daughters dead, the third a cripple. He turned his cold gaze on Tala. You are no longer a threat. You will be cast out. Then he looked at me. As for you, stranger, your debt is paid. You may leave, or you may die here with them. He had us. We were trapped. Tala was injured, we were out of ammunition, and we were facing 20 warriors. There was no way out. But as I looked into Tala's eyes, I didn't see surrender. I saw that same fire I had seen on the auction block, the fire that had started this whole thing. And I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The elder, whose name I learned was Kale, thought he had won. He held the map. He had his warriors. And he had us, broken and cornered. He made a critical mistake. He started to monologue. Your father was weak, Tala, Kyle said, his voice echoing in the dead canyon. He spoke of balance, but the world is not balanced. It is a scale, and it must be tipped in our favor. The silver from the mine will buy us an army. We will drive the white man from these lands forever. He was trying to win the hearts of his warriors to justify his coup. But as he spoke, I saw the eyes of the warriors behind him. Some were hard, loyal to Kyle, but others were uncertain. They had respected Tala's father. They were watching her now, waiting. Tala pushed herself off my shoulder, standing on her one good leg, her back straight, her chin high. She winced in pain, but her voice did not tremble when she spoke. My father was not weak, Kale, she called out, her voice ringing with authority. He was wise. He knew that the silver was not a blessing, but a curse. He knew it would bring not strength, but destruction. It would bring an army of white men down on us, not to trade, but to kill, to take our land and our lives. That is the strength you offer? The annihilation of our people? A murmur went through the warriors. She had planted a seed of doubt. Cal's face tightened. She lies. She is a broken woman trying to cling to her father's failed legacy. Am I? Tala challenged. Or are you a coward who used our enemies to murder your chief? You allied yourself with Silas, the outcast. You let him burn our village and steal our women? Is that the act of a leader? The murmur grew louder. The warriors were shifting on their horses, looking at each other. Their loyalty was wavering. Kyle saw it too. His arrogance turned to fury. Enough, he roared. She is a traitor to the new way. Seize her. 2 of his most loyal warriors dismounted and started toward us. This was it. It all came down to this. I stepped in front of Tala and Sana, my empty pistol held like a club. It was a pathetic gesture, but it was all I had. But then Sana did something unexpected. She ran forward, past me, and knelt in the dust. She began to cry, but not in fear. She was chanting, a low, mournful song in her native tongue, a death song for her sister, Nika. The warriors stopped. The song was sacred. To interrupt it was a grave dishonor. Even Kale was frozen, his face a mask of rage. He couldn't stop her without losing the last bit of respect the other warriors had for him. Tala seized the moment. You want the mine so badly, Kale? She shouted, a wild, fierce light in her eyes. Then have it. She pointed to the massive rock slide, to the tomb of Silas and his men. The map is a lie, she declared. There is no lost silver mine. The treasure my father protected was this place, a trap for greedy men who would put themselves before the people. The serpent's tooth has claimed them, just as it has now claimed Silas. The warrior holding the feather looked down at it, then back at the rock slide, a horrified understanding dawning on his face. She is lying, Kyle screamed, his composure finally breaking. The map is real. Then go, Kyle, Tala said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Go dig for your silver. Dig through the bodies of the outcasts you called brothers. Find your treasure in a tomb of traitors. The ancestors are watching you. That was the final blow. The mention of the ancestors. The sheer dishonor of what Kyle had done. It shattered his authority. One of the older warriors, a man with a deeply lined face, slowly dismounted. He walked to the center of the clearing and looked at Kyle, his eyes filled with contempt. "You have shamed us," the warrior said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "You have broken the sacred law. You are no chief." One by one, the other warriors dismounted, leaving Kyle and his two loyalists alone on their horses. Kale's face went pale. He had lost. He looked at Tala, his eyes burning with pure hatred. He let out a wordless scream of rage, yanked his horse's reins, and galloped away, his two followers close behind. They disappeared into the desert, disgraced and exiled. The remaining warriors turned to Tala. They looked at her, standing broken but unbowed, and they saw their true leader. The old warrior who had spoken first came forward and knelt before her, bowing his head. "Forgive us, daughter of the chief," he said. "We were blind." One by one, all the warriors knelt. The desert sun beat down on the canyon of death. But in the middle of the devastation, something new was being born. The people had their leader back. They made a litter for Tala and carried her from the canyon. Sana walked beside her, holding her hand, her tears finally spent. The warriors treated me not as an outsider, but as an honored guest. We journeyed for 2 days back to their village, the one Kale had allowed Silas to raid. It was a place of sorrow, but now, with the return of Tala, it was also a place of hope. They tended to my wounds and fed me. They treated Tala's leg, and though the healer said she would always walk with a limp, her spirit was whole. More than whole. She was forged in fire, stronger than ever. I stayed for a week, watching them begin to rebuild. Watching Tala, with Sana by her side, lead her people with a wisdom and strength that would have made her father proud. The night before I was set to leave, she found me by the river. She walked with the help of a carved staff, but her limp was barely noticeable. We stood in silence for a long time, watching the moon rise over the mountains. "You'll go now," she said. It wasn't a question. "This is your home," I said, "not mine." "You will always have a place here, Jack," she said softly. She turned to face me, and the moonlight caught in her eyes. "You paid your debt to my father 100 times over." "I was just trying to do the right thing," I said. She smiled, a true, genuine smile that lit up her whole face. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. That is a rarer treasure than any silver mine. She stepped closer. The air between us was thick with all the things we couldn't say. She reached out and her fingers brushed against my chest, right over my heart. A spark, a promise of a different life, a different trail. But we both knew it was a trail we couldn't walk. "Thank you," she whispered. I just nodded, my throat too tight for words. I tipped my hat, turned, and walked away. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I rode out the next morning at dawn. From the top of the ridge overlooking the valley, I stopped and glanced back one last time. I saw 3 figures standing at the edge of the village. Tala, Sana, and the old warrior. They were watching me go. Tala raised her hand, not in a wave, but in a salute, a gesture between equals. I raised my own hand in return, then turned grit toward the open desert. The trail ahead was long and dusty, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was riding toward whatever came next, and my soul for once was light. This story was a wild ride, and if you made it this far, you're a true legend. It just goes to show you that sometimes the biggest debts have nothing to do with money, and true strength isn't about the fight you can win, but the people you're willing to fight for. If you enjoyed this story, do me a favor and absolutely demolish that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Drop a comment below and let me know which twist surprised you the most. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next trail.